while he was erasing the board, they're all preparing themselves, students, receiving the lesson. It's a very important concept. In the mimer that your husband is going to say before you get married, the Friedrich Rebbe speaks about it at length. About the relationship between a teacher and a student. And a student has to prepare himself to be completely receptive to the lesson that the teacher is going to give over. Because otherwise, if he's thinking his own thoughts, he misses the lesson. He's like somewhere else. And that applies to every relationship between the person who is the giver, it's called the mashpia, the husband, and the receiver, who is the makabel, one who receives. Okay. Chapter 20. Everybody should have a copy of the sheet with chapter 20 in the upper right-hand corner. With the Hebrew and the English, you can read whichever way you can read. Hashem speaks all languages. Excuse me. Chapter 20. I'm not saying Mizbah Lodoti Yancha Danagim Tzarei Sugel Hashem Elohim Yanke Yishach Hashem HaMekaydesh. Hashem, please send us help from your holy place. So, and from Jerusalem, Yisadeka, support us. Please remember all our offerings that we brought. And he should grant to you all your heart's requests. Enable you to fulfill all your best intentions and all your good intentions. Let us rejoice in your salvation, Hashem. Uvashem Eloheinu Nigel Yamale Adonai Kol Mishalesecha Ata Yadaiti Ki Ishia Adonai Mishichay. Now I know Hashem saves His anointed ones. The Jewish people are His anointed ones. V'ya'anehu Mishmei Kodshay, and answers Him from His holy heavens. And the Gevuras with might, Yesha, salvation, Yemine from the right hand. Elam Erecha, Elam Mesusim, they come with chariots. They come with cavalry. They come with all their weapons. We come with the name of God on our lips. When I read that line there, it always reminds me of the story of the war, the great war that took place in the times of Abraham, when the 4 kings came and conquered the 5 kings who ruled Sodom. Just like the 5 boroughs here in New York, there were 5 main areas in the corrupt city of Sodom and Gomorrah. And they were defeated, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah were fleeing for their life, and they ended up falling into the clay pits. It was like quicksand. They were sinking, and they called upon their idols to save them, and it didn't help. And the king of Sodom saw it was hopeless, and he called upon the name of God, the God of Abraham, to save him. And he came out. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. And the king of Gomorrah did not. He would not call on the name of the God of Abraham. He'd rather die. And he did. So that passage there, we come with the name of God on our lips. It always reminds me of that story. Okay. We were looking at the preface by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Hasidus. What is Hasidus? To understand what Hasidus is, we have to speak about the idea that the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. We have to understand the sanctity of that concept. This is not philosophy. This is history. This is history of mankind. That there was a revolution that took place in which mankind had completely forgotten about morality and God and creation. The world was really corrupt. And out of this dark morass, spiritual darkness, emerged a great shining light, which was Avraham Avinu. And he realized on his own, he discovered the idea that there's more that meets going on than meets the eye. There must be a creator, a force behind all this. Question is, was the force conscious or not conscious? Was there goodness there or not goodness there? And he realized that life is good. That's a big company, LG. Life is good. And they realized that too. You know, there's an old story about a tailor. He had on the Lower East Side, he had a store. He didn't have enough customers to earn a good living. So somebody suggested, you know, you're a Jewish guy. Why don't you bring some holiness into your work? Don't just call yourself tailor store. Let's say, put Hashem's name in it. Hashem's name is it. Tailor shop. Hashem's tailor shop. Still didn't help too much. So he says, this is America, you have to use English terms. You go, okay, change the name a little bit. Lord and Taylor's, you call him. So the Torah, because of Abraham, Hashem made a covenant with him, a covenant, an agreement that if he would, since he decided that he's going to go out and teach everybody that idolatry is nonsense, and there's one invisible God who is the real source of all our life. Hashem says good. For that, in that case, I will renew this covenant and ratify it with your children and your children's children forever, end of all time. Now, the laws of the Torah, the guidelines of the Torah were given, they weren't just made up at that point in time. Hashem created Adam and Chava and their children, and he taught them these principles. Like we said the other day, we know that Noah learned Torah. When he built his ark, he had directions to admit into the ark creatures from the whole world so that they would survive the flood. Which creatures could come in? If they were kosher, they could come into the ark. If they were not kosher, they could also come into the ark, but in a different quantity. The non-kosher animals came 7 by 7, and the kosher animals came 2 by 2. The non-kosher animals came 2 by 2. The kosher animals came 7 by 7, so that there were pairs, male and female. And it wasn't just that he supervised their admission. It says in the Medrash, in the oral Torah, in the traditions of the stories behind the Torah, so to speak, you might even call it folklore, but it says that the ark would not admit an animal that was not kosher. They couldn't get in. It was like an invisible protective force that would not let them enter. So we learn from this, Rashi explains, from this we see that Noah learned Torah. Where did he learn it from? He learned it from his holy ancestors that he had in the 10 generations from Adam to Noah. There were 10 generations. And there were certain individuals like Enosh was a holy person, righteous person. And they carried forward the knowledge that was instilled by God in Adam. And Avram was able to learn Noah's son. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Aber. And Noah established a yeshiva, and people taught people. And Avraham made his way eventually, once he had discovered that there was a God, he made his way to the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. From Shem comes our people. That's the root of the word Semites. And from Ham, which means hot, comes a very emotional kind of people. And from Aver comes the Greek. Not from Aver. And Shem, Ham, and Japheth, not Aver. I'm sorry. Aver was a son of Shem. Okay. So they had this tradition, and it was passed along, but the very, very few people knew it and kept it. But Avraham was one of those. And he taught it to his children, who were Yitzchak and Yishmael. Yishmael went off the tracks. He was jealous. He wanted to kill. He was born of an Egyptian princess who left the idolatry of her father, who was a king, Pharaoh in Egypt, in order to be connected with Abraham and Sarah, because she saw their righteousness. And then they had two sons. Yitzchak had two sons, Cain and Hevel. And then Cain destroyed Rivka's ability to have children when he was born. He ripped apart her womb, so she could never have more children. One of them was Yaakov, was described a simple person, simple meaning straight and whole, like we learned this sikha the other day, which I gave out, Tamim Tiyeh, to be simple and whole in the service of God. Tamim Tiyeh, and Yaakov was an Ish Tam, a perfect person. So where Avraham had one son who was wicked and evil, and we suffer from him to the present day. And Yitzchak had one son who was not so good, that was Cain, and from him came all, I believe, the ruthless nations who persecuted the Jews for thousands of years, because he was jealous and hated his twin brother Yaakov. And Yaakov, and under Rivka's instrumental guidance, she risked her life for this. She made sure that the blessing that would be given by Yitzchak to their children would go to Yaakov and not to Cain. Yes, the Yishmael. Not to Edom. Esau, not to Esau. And so came a warrior people out of Esau. He was a warrior, he was a king, and he gave rise to kings. But he has been an arch enemy of his twin brother Yaakov ever since. Okay. Now Yaakov was a perfect person in the service of God. Therefore, all his children were righteous. 12 children, they became the source of the 12 tribes. And then they ended up going down into Egypt. We're not going to tell, that's a huge, tremendous story. We were around Hanukkah time. And there they grew into a nation of hundreds of thousands, millions of people in Egypt. And they were enslaved, and we were the story of Pesach. We were redeemed from slavery with signs and miracles, and gathered under the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher. And we came to Har Sinai, and at that point, these people, you have to understand, they knew the Torah. Yaakov studied Torah for many, many years in the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. And they gave him the tradition, and he passed it down to his children. And they kept the Torah. They followed the laws of the Torah. But there was a fundamental difference between them and what happened at Mount Sinai was a watershed. Because what happened before Mount Sinai was They knew it was a good thing and they did it because it was good. At Mount Sinai, that all changed. We don't do mitzvahs because they're good. They are good, but that's not why we do them. We do them because they were commanded to us. And the difference between doing a thing because you want to do it and doing a thing because you're commanded to do it is a world of difference. Because a commandment connects you to the giver of the commandment. Commandment is a connector. And when Hashem gave us commandments, he gave us himself. Just like a parent has children, some of the children can be good just out of their nature, or children can be good because they love their parents and they want to do what their parents want from them. They want to be connected to their parents. Okay, so that's when the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. This is the main point. It was given together with its explanations. So we have two levels here. We have the revealed level of the Torah, which is what is it all about? Now, let's say someone would ask you, oh, you're going to a yeshiva, you're learning Torah. What's the Torah all about? What would you answer? One word, what would you answer? What's the Torah about? Okay, what's the Torah about? Oh, life, yeah, good. How about details? I want some details. Yes. Purpose, that's also general. What's it about? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? What does the Torah tell me that I'm supposed to do? Love your fellow as your Jew. That's Torah. There was a non-Jew came to Shammai, great scholar, and said, tell me the whole story while I stand the Torah, while I stand on one foot, and I'll become a Jew. He said, he grabbed a ruler, and he said, get out of here, I'm going to give it to you. You're such a, you want me to tell you the whole Torah while you stand on one foot? I'll give you a whack. That's what I'll give you. That was Shammai. So he went to Hillel. He's asked the same question. Hillel said, if you don't like something, don't do it to somebody else. That's what they call the golden rule. And he put it in the negative because he wasn't Jewish yet. That's what the Torah is all about. The rest is commentary. Give me some more commentaries. The rest is commentary. What's a commentary? What are you going to do Friday night? What? I hear not. Shabbos. Shabbos. The Torah is about Shabbos. Oh, I never knew about that. That sounds great. Shabbos. What do I do? What about festivals? Right and wrong. Kosher, not kosher. Civil laws, laws of damages, laws of property, ownership. It's all Torah. Oh, charity. Torah is about charity, helping people. Here we go. Here comes the guilt. We'll pass this around. What are some other ideas? What do you like about being Jewish? I like my puppy. Torah is about justice. Law and order. Not stealing. Morality. Family morality. Raising children, teaching them the truth, teaching them good people. Standing up for the learning. If you don't learn, you can't do. Torah is about learning. The ideas of Torah, morality. Okay, that's all called the written Torah. Those are the laws of the revealed. That's all revealed. That's obvious. Even a non-Jewish person, if you ask him what are the Jewish people all about, he'll come up with these kinds of ideas. They're all Jewish. They make a joke, about a person. He made up a new religion. It's a very wonderful religion. People didn't want to do it. Why? Because there were no holidays. There were no holidays. All right. So that is called the revealed part of Torah. The laws of the Torah are the revealed part of the Torah. We started off the class by saying everything has a body and a soul. What's the soul of the Torah? Well, we have the physical body of the Torah, of course, the books that we learn from, the Torah scrolls, the mezuzahs, and so on. Physical objects that we use in the Torah. That's part of the body of the Torah. Morality, the ethics. What's the soul? The soul is the life. What's the life in the Torah? The life in the Torah is God. Now, everything has a body and a soul, and we'll even go further and say that the soul of the Torah, there's a body of knowledge that describes the life that's in the Torah, and then there's a soul to that. So there's a soul and the soul of the soul, because things have levels. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper. So that's what it says in the first line here. Hasidus in general, you still have these sheets here from yesterday? Hasidus in general, what does it mean, Hasidus in general? So there was a period of time when, for a few thousand years after the giving of the Torah, the Jewish people did not have trouble believing in the Torah and following the Torah with great commitment. But there were times of troubles, times of persecution, exile. They were cast out of their homes. They became wandering from place to place, looking for where they could settle, and then they would get thrown out and beaten up and robbed. And it was impossible to maintain the traditions, the teaching. Who had time to sit and learn when you're starving? They weren't Jews, were never allowed to own land. They couldn't be farmers. Couldn't have a farm to grow food. So therefore, the Jewish people became like spiritually in a state of semi-faint. Like they were, like a boxer gets knocked down, he doesn't know if he can get up again. And that was the state of the Jews. Very large areas of Jewish life were without education altogether. When I lived in Israel for a short while, very short while, I lived in a community in the north of Israel, which was was a small community with a few families from Kurdistan. They knew how to pray by heart, but they couldn't read. They were illiterate. They couldn't learn. They couldn't read. But they prayed. And it was and they didn't have an inner strength to continue because they didn't have any knowledge. So comes Hasidus, and there was a class division. There was a class of Jews emerged who were scholarly, were knowledgeable, who really knew the law and were able to learn all the tomes, all the details and the debates and the specifications and the clarifications of, does this law apply? How does it not? How does it apply? What age does it apply? At what times does it apply? The Torah is very, very complicated. It's immense. They couldn't learn that, but there were scholars who could, and they looked down so that the illiterate masses became like outcasts. People didn't want to have anything to do with them, and certainly didn't want their children to marry into their families, because you can't keep a kosher family if you don't know what kosher is. You can't keep Shabbos if you don't know what Shabbos is or the holidays. What are you supposed to do? So there was a big class division between the scholars, who were called the Torah scholars, and the Ami Haaretz, the ordinary people. Comes along a person, not out of nowhere, out of a secret tradition, because there were always, like I said yesterday, there were individuals, great souls, who were like Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses in his generation. And they passed on the teachings about the life that was in the Torah, the whole body of teachings. And there was a secret society of them, of people who dedicated their lives to helping Jews, helping poor Jews. And Rabbi Yisroel, until was born, much like when Abraham was born, was a new light came into the world. So when this soul came into the world, a very special soul came into the world with a blessing that he would bring light to the eyes of the Jewish people in his time. And he was called Yisroel because he would influence the whole of the Jewish people. And his name was Yisroel, and he became known as the Baal Shem Tov. And he initiated a new approach, which was not an approach of scorning the illiterate, but of seeing the goodness that is in them, the sincerity of their deep belief in God, their earnest desire to serve God, and the inner anguish that they felt at not being able to because they didn't have any knowledge. This is a time now, a very important time. Chai Elul is the day that this child was born. How was he born? What happened? And how did he get started? So I'm going to skip how he was born for momentarily and just jump ahead to the story. It's actually written in the back of the book of Tehillim here. How when he was 16 years old, he was an orphan. He was an orphan from the age of 3, or some say age of 5. His parents passed away. He was on his own. He started out, he used to take little children to cheder, to be able to learn Aleph Beis. In the community, he would pick up the children and take them to cheder and bring them back. One day when he was 16, he used to like solitude. He would go to the woods because he felt that he would feel the presence of godliness in nature. And he was in the woods and he was studying and reciting this Tehillim of King David and meditating on the godliness in the words and mystical things that he could discover in these words. When a man appeared to him, found him in the woods, and he said to him, you know, the innkeeper where you're lodging and his wife, they're really very special people because the name of God is on their lips all the time. Whenever someone asks them a question, they answer with the name of God. How are you today? Say, Baruch Hashem. I'm good today. Something good happened, they would say, thank the Eibishter for this happening. He said, their simple praises of Hashem, their thank you and their Gatsudank and their Baruch Hashem, their thank God, is much more precious in heaven than all your meditation on the Psalms of King David. They're on a much higher level than you are. And this was a shock to him, and it changed his whole attitude. And he began teaching other people, and who was this person? This person that appeared to him was actually a hidden tzaddik. He was a reincarnation of Elijah the prophet in his time. And he was part of this secret society that went around incognito, helping people and saving them. When he's saving them from what? When they couldn't pay the rent and the landlord was throwing them into a dungeon until someone could pay the rent, he would go out and raise kopecks here and kopecks there until he could raise the money to redeem them and get them out of jail. That's what these people did. There's a story in the memoirs of the previous Rebbe how a priest who felt if he could convert Jews, he would surely go to get a high place in heaven. And he was berating the simple Jews who lived in this village that was owned by the wealthy landlord. And he was giving them arguments from the verses in the Torah, which they didn't know, which proved supposedly that they should all become Christian. And if nobody could answer his arguments, then they would all have to convert by a certain date. And the people didn't know what to do. They didn't have answers for his scholarly questions. There was a simple shoemaker in the crowd who rose up all of a sudden and said, "I'll answer your questions." And he answered all those questions, and put him to shame and showed that he was misinterpreting everything. And he saved the Jews of his community. Who was he? He was one of that group of hidden tzaddikim. Now that people knew who he was, he felt he couldn't stay any longer. He moved on to a different place. Then the priest came back. The story goes on. The priest came back and he started haranguing the people all over again, and they were in danger. He came back. He reappeared. When he heard about it, he reappeared. He again refuted all of his specious arguments, for which they arrested him and said, "Oh, you're such a scholar. We have to bring you to speak to the bishop." And they took him away to headquarters of the big priests of the day, and he had to go through many interrogations and disputations, and he prevailed in all of them. So they killed him. Wolf, story of Wolf the Cobbler. The whole story is written at length in the memoirs. You have it downstairs. Memoirs of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So Eliyahu introduced this young man called Yisrael, introduced him to this society, and he began teaching them the importance of reaching out to the simple, uneducated Jews, and they went from place to place. They were the first shluchim. They went from place to place, and what would they do? They were tremendous scholars, but they didn't spend their time learning Gemara. They spent their time teaching Aleph Beis and blessings to the simple people. And that's what Hasidus is all about bringing a candle, a lit candle, to an unlit candle. And you touch them together, and now there are two candles, about lighting up the souls of the Jewish population of the day, which was very, very low, very discouraged because of the economic factors, because of the persecutions, because of even false saviors who betrayed the faith of the Jewish people. And so they were very depressed. The whole generation was extremely depressed. It was, if you could, you know what you could compare it to? You could compare it to after Second World War, after the Holocaust, when so many millions and millions of people, scholars and righteous people, had been wiped out with such cruelty. People felt, many thousands of people in our generation felt they could not go on. There was no point. There was no God. If this is what God would do to us, who can believe in such a God, and so on. And came to Lubavitcher Rebbe as a young man. He came like the Baal Shem Tov in his time, and he began one person at a time, bringing out the flame of belief, love of God, fear of God, and ernstkeit, sincerity, and the desire to serve God with a full heart. That's Hasidus in general. That's what Hasidus is all about. Bringing the life back to a generation that was in deep depression. in deep depression. I'm sure you've met people like that, friends of your grandparents who didn't survive spiritually. They survived physically, but not spiritually. So many people we meet, and not just the Holocaust from Germany and Poland, but for then 70 years of tremendous persecution under communism. 70 years, 3 generations. People, you meet them in Sheepshead Bay, for instance, in these areas where the newcomers from Russian background settled. They don't know anything. And now we have another area of neglect, which is Eretz Israel, because Israel was established politically by these same uneducated people, by and large. And we find now that children, so like myself, for instance, brought up in a Reformed Jewish home, who know a little bit. We know a little bit, like in my house, we had a Seder every year, for one night anyway, right? Boys coming from Israel don't know what Pesach is. They never had matzah in their life. Never had matzah. It was unbelievable. When I lived in Israel, I went to a kibbutz there where we lived. I gave them shmur and matzah. They said, "Oh, we're going to eat them." I said, "No, save it for Pesach." Don't talk to me about religion, they said. I have more religion in me than you. I live in Israel. So there's tremendous areas of lack where knowledge of Judaism was not transmitted. So there's no feeling for Judaism. And if they marry out, they marry Russian girls who say they're Jewish. They're not. So what? But the children aren't Jewish. They have a 5th column in Israel. How? Well, they're going to protest and say free Palestine. Enemies within our own people because of the big problems. Okay? But the idea of Hasidus in general is to ignite the spark of life in every single Jew, which is pure and whole. And you know, they publish this sheet every week. The young shluchim are going to all kinds of places in the world. And they every week they write about another young couple where they went. And you can envy what they're doing. They meet people. Like just one story, a shliach in a certain place, he met a person, he was in the hospital, he visited him. He asked him, would you like to put on tefillin? He said, tefillin? I didn't put on tefillin since my bar mitzvah. He was 84 years old. He says, I used to have a pair. Can you find my tefillin? He said to the shliach. And of course, the family that he raised, children and grandchildren, were completely alienated from Judaism. He found the tefillin. He took them to a sofer. He had them refurbished and checked over that they were kosher. He brought him to him in the hospital, and he put on the tefillin. He cried. He cried like a baby. Over 70 years, he had not put on tefillin. He said, thank you, thank you. There's a story I just read last week. Thank you, he said. I feel like you've lifted a weight off of my heart. Now I can go. And 2 weeks later, he gave his soul back to Hashem. This is Hasidus in general. Now we have to know what is Hasidus Chabad. But for that, we have to do a lot of things till we get till tomorrow. Thank you so much for coming. There should be an attendance sheet somewhere. I didn't see it. So, also, another thought, which I didn't give you yesterday, which is this sheet here is, I try to do this every week. Like I used to teach a class, and the class disbanded because the person giving the class moved away. He said, keep in touch with the Hebra. So I started writing to them. And then people liked it, and more people and more people. So there's a few thousand people who get this. If you would like to get a weekly Torah thought on a grown-up level or on a child's level, the thoughts on the child, they're all based on the teachings of the Rebbe. Fill out your email address and give it to me tomorrow. Your name, and please print neatly your name and address and email. Your name and email address. I'm happy to put you. Believe me. Sorry. Shiggy. Huh? Rip. Easy. You're Maya. I saw there was Maya on the list. I didn't know who she was. I didn't hear before.
Yes.
Invitation.
Yeah.
Play the star. Shoshana. Oh, raise up. Shoshana is a rose.
Oh,
Raise. Like it is. A rose is a rose is a raise. There's an illness. Also, I just don't know what's going on for Shoshana. And then she's going to have boys.
yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.